shortly place a 200% tariff on all wines, champagnes, and alcoholic products coming out of France.
A 200% tariff on all, and here we go into capitals, wines, champagnes, and alcoholic products coming out of France.
What if I told you President Trump's tariff drama completely backfired because of French wine and peanut butter? Stick around to see how Macron's stiletto strategy turned Trump's trade war into a European boomerang that even the White House didn't see coming. Quick favor before we move on. If you appreciate this content, consider giving this video a like and subscribing to the channel. Believe it or not, more than 92% of viewers haven't subscribed yet. It's free and only takes a second, but it means the world to us. So, did you subscribe already? Great. Thank you so much for your support. Now, back to the video. When Trump's threats of tariffs on French wine and luxury goods first leaked, it felt like the French economy had walked straight into a glass door in front of everyone. The panic was immediate. Investors saw red. Markets dropped like they'd been told wine was about to be replaced with box juice. French winemakers, some of whom still compare vintages with the same drama of choosing a baby name, were left gulping down their prized bottles while imagining entire vineyards going under.
And tweeted on his Truth Social, threatening tariffs on alcoholic drinks from the EU.
And then there was Emmanuel Macron, who reportedly burned the midnight oil like a college student realizing their thesis was due the next morning. It started with a leaked US tariff report. Trump, who at this point seemed to treat tariffs like his personal hobby, was targeting France's crown jewels, its wine, its fashion, and its goofy little cheese plates that cost more than your monthly Wi-Fi bill. Think about it. Bordeaux and Burgundy, synonymous with French elegance, were now lined up in the US crosshairs. Trump claimed that France, and Europe in general, was unfair to American trade interests, but the timing was suspiciously convenient. Many suggested it was personal.
The European Union treats us very badly. They have for years. And as you know, we're going to be doing reciprocal tariffs.
After all, Macron had openly criticized him over NATO, climate change, and, well, Trump being Trump. The effect on France was brutal. Investors started pulling out faster than someone realizing they just walked into a wasp's nest. Luxury brand stocks saw a tumble, and analysts whispered that even Louis Vuitton, the mother of obnoxiously expensive bags, could feel the pressure. Meanwhile, small wine producers began running profit scenarios based on Trump's rumored 100% tariffs. Spoiler, none of the math worked in their favor. Many believe Trump wasn't just going after France's economy, but its pride. It's hard to look at the wine industry, so embedded in French culture, and not see Trump's move as a wrecking ball swinging straight for Parisian identity itself. French wine is more than just a product. It's like a national flex. To threaten it was to insult the entire country before breakfast.
Shortly place a 200% tariff on all wines, champagnes, and alcoholic products coming out of France.
Here's where it gets interesting, though. To justify these tariffs, Trump leaned on something called the Emergency Economic Powers Act of 1977. This act was meant to let presidents respond to, say, national security risks or international crises, not go after the flavor of your Merlot.
Now, French products, including wine and cheese, could face 100% tariffs as the U.S. confronts France over its taxes on.
But Trump made it work through some legal gymnastics that left trade experts blinking in disbelief. By stretching the definitions of unfair advantages in foreign subsidies, he found a loophole wide enough to drive his ego through. Critics said this set a dangerous precedent. If French wine could be treated like a threat, then what was next? Italian olive oil treated like it was hiding secret missiles? French cheese accused of espionage? The logic was as murky as a $2 bottle of wine. Now, here's where the panic in France shifted gears into action. Macron realized something crucial. It wasn't just France under fire. Trump's tariffs weren't random. They were a shot across Europe's bow.
This is yet another escalation here with allies. I mean, Donald Trump has vilified the EU for some time in economic terms.
Macron's weakness could become the EU's weakness, so he decided to flip the narrative. That began with a fiery call between Macron and key EU leaders, where, reportedly, he demanded a unified response as if inspiring his EU Avengers team. French representatives at trade meetings didn't waste time. Under Macron's orders, they pushed for an emergency strategy session with EU trade officials. In under 48 hours, the panic turned into carefully calculated retaliation planning.
In the last hour, he says the European Union, one of the most hostile and abusive taxing and tariffing authorities in the world.
Here's where Macron leaned into strategy. He knew that direct panic wasn't going to solve anything. Trump loved chaos, after all. Macron's team instead began framing this as groundwork for European solidarity, a chess game that placed not just France, but the entire EU into a position of strength. The question of how to retaliate wasn't just about recovering from immediate financial losses. It was about sending a loud and unmistakably witty message to the US. This was no longer just about wine or handbags. Sure, the price of your Cabernet Sauvignon might have been at stake, but what Macron understood was bigger. This was about protecting the EU's financial ecosystem and its leverage in global trade. Within days, France proposed retaliation tariffs coordinated with the EU as a bloc, solidifying Europe as more than just a collection of individual states. And that, folks, was a solid opening punch. But here's the thing that really drove the White House to scratch their heads in confusion. This wasn't done with the loud chest-thumping Trump favored. Macron's approach was quieter, but that didn't make it any less sharp.
Threatened to place additional tariffs on European alcohol if the EU does not lift its 50% tariff on U.S. whiskey.
The retaliation plan wasn't just aimed at the U.S. economy, but at Trump's voter base specifically. It was a strategy designed to hit home, and, in this case, that meant rural America, bourbon-loving Kentucky, and denim-loving factory workers across Republican strongholds. And France wasn't working alone. The EU was right there, backing every snarky move France proposed. What started as Trump versing French wine spiraled into Macron saying, "All right, let's make this an EU-wide group project." It wasn't just about saving vineyards anymore. It was about demonstrating that Trump's go-it-alone strategy could be outfoxed by teamwork. Speaking of which, the retaliation was about to get even more personal for Trump's supporters. You'll never guess what France and the EU had in store for bourbon, peanut butter, and American denim. And trust me, it wasn't a toast to their greatness. What do bourbon, peanut butter, and denim all have in common? No, this isn't the setup for some weird dinner party. These American staples suddenly became weapons in a retaliation plan so sharp, it earned the nickname the French Stiletto Strategy. Crafted by Macron's team, it wasn't just revenge. It was payback with precision. When Trump swung at French wine and luxury goods, Macron wasted no time. It wasn't just the speed that impressed economists. It was his sheer audacity. Within days of Trump's threats, Macron fired back with a list of symbolic American goods he planned to tax, every choice dripping with deliberate intent. Bourbon. Hello, Kentucky, Trump country. Blue jeans, because nothing screams America like denim factories and swing states. And peanut butter, because apparently breakfast spreads are now fair game in global disputes. Macron wasn't just retaliating economically. He was poking Trump's voter base in the eye.
This approach that the president and his administration is taking shows just how quickly some of this tariff policy can get out of hand.
How did they pick these products? Was someone in the French government just throwing darts at bizarre combinations? Not quite. Macron's team used a strategy that trade officials called mirror list logic. The idea was simple: create a counterstrike that reflected Trump's approach, hitting goods that weren't just economically important, but culturally symbolic. Much like how French wine represents more than just a beverage, Bourbon carries a certain patriotic swagger, deeply rooted in Southern pride, and conveniently located in Republican states. It wasn't random at all. It was more like a well-played chess move. You hit a French vineyard? Fine. We'll tax what you sip with your barbecue ribs. Call it petty or brilliant, but it was undeniably calculated. The EU wasn't just standing by in all of this either. Another key part of Macron's strategy involved the European Crisis Tariff Network, a system so efficient it could have rivaled Amazon Prime. This network was designed to respond to any U.S. tariffs within days, coordinating countermeasures across the continent at lightning speed. It allowed France to retaliate without acting in isolation. Picture it like a trade boomerang. Trump threw a tariff at Europe, and thanks to this system, France could whip one right back. The targeted approach of the stiletto strategy meshed perfectly with the crisis network. Instead of a clunky response, this was a scalpel, sharp and precise. And that precision? Oh, it rattled the White House. Advisors reportedly broke out into heated debates about how to handle the French response. Some wanted Trump to double down, adding even stiffer tariffs, while others worried about the backlash. A key piece of the confusion stemmed from the political implications. French wine and handbags were all well and good to target, but French tariffs on bourbon, peanut butter, and jeans didn't just hit American wallets. They hit voters in Trump's strongholds. A farmer in Arkansas or a bourbon distiller in Kentucky might not care about French fashion taxes, but adding an extra cost to their product? That was another story entirely.
So Donald Trump's tariff war on the world, it seems, continues with his latest salvo against the European Union.
6 months to a year, I would anticipate that your average consumer is going to feel just the U.S. tariffs.
Adding to the chaos, Macron didn't stop with tariff lists. His government threw in some extra jabs for good measure, like a proposal to tighten health labeling laws on U.S. potato imports. Yep, even the humble French fry found itself dragged into this mess. Macron's team also looked at ways to slap higher prices on key American tech components, subtly but effectively nudging at another industry Trump liked to tout as thriving under his leadership.
This is a very critical time for America's farmers. Every time the president uses the word tariff, he caused complete chaos and confusion.
This was no shotgun approach. Every move was chosen to either hit Trump's electoral base or create just enough trouble for U.S. businesses to feel the strain without tanking France's own economy. The precision of what Macron did earned it that stiletto nickname among trade diplomats. A stiletto is a small, thin blade, not flashy like a battle axe, but exceptionally effective for targeted attacks. That's exactly what this was. And while Trump's tariffs were wild and broad, imposing taxes on billions of dollars worth of goods across several countries, Macron's response felt almost personal. Some analysts even joked that France had weaponized sarcasm in its retaliation. Behind the scenes, Trump's advisors argued over how much escalation the U.S. could afford. The narrative of America First had been central to Trump's political identity. But what happens when that same narrative starts backfiring? Reports emerged of infighting among his team, with some urging restraint to avoid blowback from swing states leading into the next election. Others pushed for doubling down, arguing that anything less would make Trump look weak. And let's be honest, Trump wasn't someone who took kindly to the image of weakness. In the end, the French stiletto didn't just sting, it destabilized Trump's wider plans. Macron's retaliation forced the U.S. to take a harder look at its tariff strategy, not just with France, but with the entire EU.
And it undermines our ability to make agreements with other countries about what kinds of trade we want to see. I mean, there's no doubt trade is so important.
The White House wasn't built for rapid responses to such pinpoint counterattacks, and you could almost hear the gears grinding as they tried to figure out their next move. Was Trump's team ready for a prolonged chess match with Macron's EU-backed retaliation plan? That was starting to look doubtful. Every American product chosen for tariffs wasn't just a financial hit. It carried political weight. Macron knew it, the EU knew it, and soon enough, so did Trump's supporters. But this wasn't the end of Macron's strategy. Far from it. If Trump thought France was done with tit-for-tat tariffs, he was in for a rude awakening. Macron didn't just retaliate, he expanded the game entirely. France was about to go global with its counterattack, and Macron was already making calls to new allies in Asia. The next stage wasn't just about fighting back, it was about goading the US into a corner it couldn't easily escape. Did you know France didn't just stick to wine and cheese to fight back? Macron went global, reaching out to Japan, South Korea, and even China to make sure Trump's tariffs weren't just a bad day for Europe, they became a bad day for America's trade plans too. And honestly, it was a move as bold as drinking Coke with a croissant. It wasn't just about patching things up within Europe anymore. Macron realized if he wanted to sidestep US tariffs entirely, he needed to expand France's trade network, and fast.
Talks will start at some point. President Trump will be forced to make some deals. The EU will be one of the most obvious deals that he has to make.
The Asian strategy started taking shape when Macron's team noticed something. Trump's tariff war was putting pressure not just on France or the EU, but on America's other trading partners, especially in Asia. The US had already cranked up tariffs against China, which left Japan and South Korea nervously watching their own trade issues with Washington. So Macron swooped in like the guy sliding into a group chat with the perfect gif. He sent his foreign trade minister, Olivier Becht, on a diplomatic tour across Asia, just as the US was ramping up its tariff threats. It was perfect timing. France positioned itself as the sane alternative to an increasingly unpredictable America. Suddenly, Tokyo and Seoul were all ears. France wasn't just offering handshakes and baguettes. They were laying out specific plans. Macron pitched the idea of supply chain partnerships that would make French industries less dependent on US manufacturing altogether. Chips, batteries, and other high-demand tech materials were a big part of the deal. These kinds of parts were critical for French businesses, and by bringing in allies like Japan and South Korea, France was building a safety net. If Trump was trying to corner France, Macron was expanding the board. And then there was China. France's approach to Beijing was more layered than a millefeuille pastry. Macron initiated talks about Airbus collaborations, looked into nuclear energy agreements, and even entertained ideas about boosting Chinese investments in European infrastructure. France wasn't ignoring the elephant in the room. China comes with all sorts of trade-related baggage. But Macron played cautiously. By securing deals that benefited both sides without becoming overly reliant on Beijing, he walked a fine line. The result? A stronger French economy with a built-in resistance against Trump's tariffs. Of course, not everyone was on board with this master plan. Germany, a heavyweight within the EU, felt a bit hesitant about poking the Trump-shaped bear. For one, their car industry relied heavily on access to the US market, and dragging the whole EU deeper into a trade war wasn't exactly on Berlin's mood board. But some factions in Germany, Hello Greens, saw this as an opportunity to pivot away from traditional industries and diversify trade. Macron couldn't exactly steamroll Germany's skepticism, but he got enough cautious support to keep his plan from stalling. Elsewhere, things were a little smoother. Greece, for example, had been getting cozy with Chinese investments for a while, and saw Macron's initiatives as a step in the right direction. After all, Beijing had been busy upgrading Greek ports and giving their economy a facelift. So, the Greek government didn't need much convincing. They were already placing bets on global partnerships, and this just added more chips to the table. Macron's diplomacy wasn't just about deals, it was about symbolism. Picture him as Nick Fury putting together a global Avengers team, telling Trump, "One nation tariffs? Amateur hour." By rallying multiple countries with their own trade issues with the US, he turned what could have been a solo fight into a worldwide coalition. Japan and South Korea weren't just signing paperwork. They were solidifying an economic alliance that stood as an alternative to Trump's combative, America First policies. If the US was building walls, Macron was building bridges. And Trump? Well, his administration didn't see this coming. By the time lawsuits in federal court started unraveling parts of Trump's tariff scheme, the White House was already dealing with international backlash. The U.S. Court of International Trade ruled that Trump had overstepped his executive authority. Turns out, skipping things like public input and proper documentation doesn't sit well with judges. The court decisions gave Macron more room to flex his strategy, and as the legal roadblocks piled up, Trump's tariffs went from tough talk threats to an international embarrassment.
Presented countries checking European wine and spirit stocks. Take a quick look at that to see the effect or not.
Meanwhile, the economic alliances Macron had secured were showing returns. Airbus, a critical player in France's economy, gained wiggle room by expanding its partnerships in Asia. France also leaned more heavily on these new agreements for tech imports, bypassing some of the supply chain issues that Trump's tax tantrums were supposed to cause. Even nuclear energy deals with China hinted at Macron's broader goal: make France harder to isolate and make Trump's tariffs harder to enforce. By the time Washington started recalculating its approach, Macron's coalition had already made its mark. Trade experts began calling Trump's tariffs unsustainable, internally and globally. And while Trump had argued his tariffs would strengthen U.S. industries, all they seemed to do by this point was inspire the rest of the planet to strategize against them.
A 200% tariff on all, and here we go into capitals, wines, champagnes and alcoholic products coming out of France.
Macron didn't just retaliate with tariffs, he outmaneuvered the whole concept of them. So, France wasn't just pouring wine while the US threw punches. Macron played a global chess game that forced Washington into check. But this wasn't just about beating Trump. France's battle set the stage for how economic conflicts could be tackled in the future. Global alliances, coordinated trade policies, and bending when the opponent tries to break you. It's all there in the playbook now, thanks to France. And who's to say Europe won't lean on those moves next time another global power tries to throw its weight around? Macron didn't just save French wine, he rewrote the rulebook on standing up to U.S. economic aggression. By rallying the EU, dodging Trump's tariffs, and hitting America where it hurt most, bourbon, jeans, and peanut butter, he turned chaos into strategy. Even the U.S. Court of International Trade had to step in, calling out Trump for overstepping his authority, further unraveling his tariff plans. If one country could outwit a superpower and rally an entire continent, it raises the question, are global trade wars more about power moves or clever teamwork? Next time, who's playing chess and who's just flipping the board?